listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Taube.
All right. Thank you for coming today, Frankie. Frankie Nelson is my guest today. I am Matt Taube, podcast host of Rise Up, stories of resilience, renewal, and recovery. Frankie, how's it going?
It's going really great. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming. I really, really love it.
You're welcome. I rushed home from school for you today.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So let's tell our audience and everybody else a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a teacher. I'm a husband. I'm a dad of 8-year-old son, Milo, who we had through surrogacy. I'm a children's book author. Me and my husband have written 2 books about our sort of journeys through surrogacy and through life. I'm an all-around fun person.
Amazing. And so, obviously having you as a guest on the show, there's some addiction involved. So with all that being said, and we talked a little bit beforehand before we got started here, the whole kind of getting it out there and what kind of got you prompted to talk about it, and how my side of it was more along the lines of, here we are years after we've gone through addiction, we're in recovery, that people who don't know us don't associate our addictions with who we are, and they're kind of taken back at first about that. So let's talk a bit about that, like your addiction, how you got into it. Like, give me the background a bit on it, and then we'll take it up from there and go through recovery and your story, and then what brought you talking about it live.
I've done so much therapy as to why and how. We never really touch upon the drugs, but to start off, I was smoking weed as a kid, and I probably liked it a lot. To be honest, as I told you, I still smoke weed, but I remember the first time I did cocaine and who got it for me and everything. It was my grade 12 graduation. Sorry. And I did it anyways. I really liked it, but I dabbled in drugs for years, but I think being gay and, I grew up with a lot of pain and, lots and lots of pain, and I was not accepted by my family, and really, to be honest, they were sort of my first bullies in life. I hate to say it, and I grew up with pain, and my real addiction started, I moved to New York City. Drugs were rampant there. I'd never been around so much drugs. And I moved there with my first love, and he dumped me, and I wasn't prepared for it. It was the first time I felt loved in a long time, just not to get into like therapy. I wasn't speaking to my family at this point. I felt really bad. And then he dumped me, and I ended up moving in with a drug dealer, unbeknownst to me actually at the time. And I just drowned my sorrows. And I really started to fall in love with a bunch of like drugs, but mainly got into, once I started to do crystal meth and cocaine, I obviously had some money then that I blew through, but I just became addicted. And I ended up very addicted on and off for, oh my God, I had like 15 years, I guess. A long time. It felt like a long time.
Yeah. Especially looking back at what you were doing, 15 years is a very long time.
Very long time. Sometimes I'm very worried about what the future brings, like with some of the ways that you do drugs, you don't have any thought to your health at the time. You really think, I don't know if it's just part from being young and part from just, drugs make you robotic. I remember just going to that bank machine and taking out it didn't matter. And I was stealing. I was an awful person. I'm happy. So I think I went to rehab the first time at 30. I knew that. I always knew. I'm not one of those people that sort of didn't know that there was an addiction problem. Like I knew, and I was always very hard on myself about it. And that made it, I think, even worse. But at 30, I thought I was ready. I also thought, this is a joke, that rehab was a special place. Like I say to people all the time, I was 30 and I was so stupid to believe that, like, rehab was a magic place. You just go in and you get better. I didn't realize how much work it was. Because every time as a young kid, I don't want to sound stupid, Liz Taylor would go off to rehab and she'd come out looking better. She'd come out looking fabulous and she'd get to do a bunch of shows.
It was like a spa. It's a spa.
And so the first place I looked into was the Betty Ford Clinic. I'm like, I'm going to go there. And then I looked at the cost and I was like, oh, this costs a lot. And my first place I went was a private facility, and I did pay money because I thought, okay, well, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on drugs. I will spend $25 on this. And it was worth the while. And it was. And the private was better than the public, I will say, the way they treat you and the surroundings. But it was a lot of work. And I wasn't ready for changing my entire life, because that's what eventually had to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything changed. Nothing is the same as it once was.
Nothing's the same. And it's the only thing that's the same are the problems that were there the day before you went in. You just didn't realize they were there. They're the same. Like everything that we were kind of running from or escaping from, whatever that we were kind of putting off to the side, all the trouble, all of this, that's there when we're done. We just have to focus on it and take it head on. That was the challenge I always faced.
And I'm still taking a lot of it head on. Those issues that I'm talking about the homosexuality and all of that, I've been working on that to this day. I think for me, so I went to rehab 3 times. The second time was a farce. I think I can't even speak of it. I was actually doing drugs during rehab, so I know that that's why it was a farce. I think I was trying to get people off my back at that point.
Yeah.
And then I had a scary accident one night while on drugs at home. I was taking another drug that I passed out while I was taking the drug. And I fell because I passed out while I was sitting. And I hit my head and I woke up in a huge pool of blood. Everywhere. Like I was just lying in it because I smashed my head open while I fell. And I think that was sort of the start of me realizing I didn't want to die. And so I needed something even more than that. And I just made this decision. I knew since I was a young kid that I wanted to be a parent. And So some of this is just hard to talk about anyway. So but I've worked with kids with children since I was a young person. I worked with children until I was 24 years old, like little kids at camp. Just really liked kids. And maybe it's because adults were hurting me all the time and kids were just nice. Like I always try and relate back what my connection was. And I remember when I came out that my father said the saddest part for him was that I'll never be a parent. And I think that always sort of stuck with me. I think he meant it in a lovely way, but he was right. At the time in 1989, there was no gay rights, there was no surrogacy, and there was no all of this stuff. And so I had decided, I did know at this point, I forget, 15 years ago, that I could be a parent. One of my cousins in LA had surrogated 2 girls, and I knew people that were adopting. And so I went into that rehab the last time saying, and I remember and over throughout trying to get ready, I was always mad at everyone, as most drug addicts are. And I remember, I think my dad or my parents consistently telling me, we can't be happy for you, and you have to be happy for yourself. Like I think he meant was I was constantly looking for outside approval.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't care. And I kept saying, but you're my dad, you should care. And he's like, I don't care. If you're happy, then I'm happy. And I don't know, something in my head was like, maybe it's time for me to figure out what will make me happy. And I thought to myself, children, maybe I can do this. I had a focus, and I went into rehab, and my mom always reminds me of this story because I didn't even tell anyone I went to rehab the last time because, third time I was the boy who cried wolf, and it was, everyone had hope, but 3 times and lots of addiction and lies and stealing. And I said to my mom, I said, one day she was, you're going to rehab? And I said, yeah, it's going to work this time. And she, whatever, didn't believe me, but she always repeats the story because she remembers, I guess I don't know, she saw something in me that day that maybe she believed, and it did work that time. I was older, ready, I was tired. I threw out my phone. I got a new number.
Right.
And I mean this because drug addicts know your number, and I knew all of their numbers, but I didn't write any of them down. I threw it out, and I changed my whole life, and it was scary and daunting, and still, it's hard to change all your friends and lose. I lost so many along the way. I lost jobs and professions along the way.
Yeah, people don't realize all that happens, and it's when I remember the night before I went into rehab. About 5 years ago, I went to rehab. The program I did, I actually had to go once a week to prepare myself for the program.
Yeah,
and I got in. There was a wait list. I begged. I was begging to go in. I got in, and he said, "Just so you know, when you get out, the amount of people that will be there to support you, all of your friends that you thought you had, will be able to fit on the back of a motorcycle."
Yeah.
And it was so, but what do you mean? Right. I was ready for it, but I wasn't, so I don't think a lot of people who look at people who've gone through recovery realize there's so much more involved with going to that rehab center, and whether it works once, twice, it's a third time, a fifth time, it's not easy. I had a friend of mine, my best friend, to say to me, because he had also gone through addiction and recovery, and he said, "Just so you know, going in there means you are saying goodbye to your very best friend." And I didn't understand it. It gives me chills. I get choked up even thinking about it, where no matter what, that best friend of mine was there. That addiction was there to not judge me. Sure, let's forget about it. Let's do what we got to do. It was so numbing to come out of there. And I remember when I did it, I didn't tell anybody either. And I actually had permission to stay, to live. It was a live-in. I got permission to live out. And I would wake up at 4 a.m, train my clients, get to rehab by 8:30, do a 9-hour stint, then go back to train my clients and go home.
Wow.
Right. Every day.
I needed to be in somewhere because nighttime is my problem. But
it was more of like, I think I maybe slept 3 hours. You get home and you're just like, it was just crazy. But yeah, I get it. People don't realize that there's so much more involved when, I met people who had been in 6, 7, 8 times. And I was like, but, and again, that very first day when you're in there, I remember sitting there myself thinking, this is the last place. Like, I'd never really felt that alone in my life. That at that very moment, because there was no one there to support me. Yeah. It was me and me. Yeah. Like, you look in the mirror, lied, cheat, this, that, like stolen, whatever it was, and you face it, and it's tough, and people don't realize how hard it is to come out of that and think, okay, I can do this.
I can do this, and I think one of the biggest things, and it sort of just made me think about this for me after rehab, and this is how far I've been, because the first goal, and I'm sure for you as well, was gaining the trust back of the people that meant the most to you. Yeah. And that's your family and best friends or whoever it is. Yeah. And so that was the first thing. And I remember that was really hard to get to because you would still go to family functions and you were still the drug addict. Not on purpose, but if that's all they knew for the last 15 years, they were still treating you like that. Right. And I have to say, like, when I, as a teacher, this is just as an aside, but all that, what you do as a drug addict, you lie, you're late, you never show up, you are completely irresponsible and you can't be counted on. That's what 100%. I do. But so now when I have students that do that, for one, now I'm never late. I'm always responsible. You can always count on me. because I've gone, and I'm sure you could say the same, you go the opposite route because you're trying so hard to recover or make up for it.
Yeah.
And I have students all the time that are late. Like, I'm so hard on them, I have to say, because it reminds me of really bad drug. And I sometimes tell them why it triggers me,
right.
You know, that their behavior is acting like someone who has issues. Now, sometimes maybe they do have an issue, and maybe that's something that I can help them with. But sometimes, right. Anyway, I just was thinking about that.
That's right. And it's funny, with that being said, you know, I find that addicts, you know, and people in recovery are extremely empathetic afterwards.
Yes.
We notice a lot more, you know, it's always one of those, like, I'll say to my kids, like, hey, you don't know what's happening in somebody else's day. You have no idea at all. And that's, and listen, I'm not perfect with it. There are days where I do not say that. And it's the opposite. But that's so you came out, so you did it the third time and it worked.
And yes, and I didn't ever do crystal meth or cocaine ever again.
Awesome. And then you were in New York still, and you came back to Toronto when?
No, I was back in Toronto. I had lost my job there. I mean, I really, you know, I went to New York with a huge amount of money. I spent it all in 2 years. I ended up I lost my job because I just wasn't showing up, and they were lovely to me. They even offered me rehab, but I was 25. I was so not ready. Like, I thought that was like, how am I going to call my parents? I wish I had kind of done it, but I'm not sure it would have. At 25, I don't know that my head was around in the right place. So anyways.
You have to be ready. You need to be ready for all that stuff. Like, it's.
You need to be ready.
You need to be ready. Whether to start it, to finish it, whether it was staying in New York and getting the help or whatever you needed. Every step of it, you need to be ready.
And I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I have a family that was able to, like, listen, I was on, when I went to rehab, I was on welfare. I've been going to food banks. I had a place to stay because my parents were nice enough to pay my rent, but we rarely spoke. We didn't speak ever, but they paid rent for me, so I wasn't on the street. Because I'd be on the street now. I don't know where I'd be if I wasn't as lucky to be as blessed. I don't want to use the term blessed. I feel lucky, and I know so many people don't have that. So I mean,
I think it's the heart of it. But there are people who don't have that, and I know a lot of people that I talk to for the podcast. We have these stories of really helpful support.
Yeah.
Right. And we all say the same thing. We know there are many that don't have the opportunities that we've had. And that's part of doing this podcast, is to kind of get this out there and explain to people that we are some of the lucky ones. Like I said, I met somebody who would go to rehab because it was repeatedly 3 square meals a day and a roof over their head for 21 to 28 days. They'd leave. A couple of weeks later, they're back in. Right? Like, that's when rehab is the roof of when rehab is the stability. We don't realize that it's a struggle.
Well, people go to jail for the same reason. So I believe it, right? I believe it.
Yeah. So you're back in Toronto.
I wanted to say, like, I feel very lucky because I know I would be on the street and not sure where I'd be, like, if I was anyone else or in another family. So I'm blessed. I will say blessed. I'm not very religious.
100% you're blessed. 100%.
I feel very lucky that way. But yeah, to get back, I was going to say right after. So, and one of the funny things about leaving rehab 15 years ago was, you know, I don't know if you know, but were you in a relationship when you were in rehab? Were you with?
I was married, yeah.
Okay. So I was not in a relationship. And, you know, a lot of rehabs say, don't get in a relationship. You can't love yourself. How the hell are you going to love somebody else?
Right. 1 year. Gee, there's a list. And depending on who you ask, there's a limit. Yeah.
Which is why I never prescribed to, and I couldn't prescribe to the 12-step program. It wasn't for me. I tried it many times. I'm not against anything that helps anyone. But for me, I was not someone who liked a club or wanted to fit. It felt like something that I had to go to, and it was a club, and I needed someone to fit in. And those things stressed me out. And because of that, I was never able to talk. I'm very good at talking and in group settings, but I was not comfortable standing in front of a room.
No.
So, and I wanted to talk. So I needed to find another place, and I did a lot of, like, I went to the John Woods here, and I did group therapy afterwards for a couple years. I volunteered.
Was John Woods that worked?
What?
John Woods was where you went that it worked?
Yeah.
It's funny. That's where I was.
Well, I figured that's where you went because, well, just based on the weekly.
Yeah.
That was not the same when I first went. You could just go, but you had to do weekly and then get in.
Yeah.
There was a gay men's group too, so that it was a little separate, so I could sort of sneak in through that way. And listen, I didn't love the John Woods. There was stuff I didn't like at all. I think that they should have had a lot more rules. Like I said, I did drugs. No, anyway, I'm not going to get into their thing. But what I will say about it is it's all about you. So there's a lot of noise there, and you need to focus on what you're there for and get out.
And that's what the point of rehab is. And I tried the 12 steps, and I'll tell you a funny story. The very first AA meeting I went to, and it is different strokes for different folks. Like, they have different flavor sunflower seeds now because people like different flavors. That's how it works.
Right.
So whatever works. And the very first meeting I went to, and it was really funny. My wife came with me, and she had in the baby Bjorn, she had our 1-year-old, not even with us, strapped in, and he was younger than that, I think. And I'm hearing story after story after story of man after man after man after another man goes up, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm looking around. I looked at my wife and I said, "We're at the gay AA meeting."
Where were you at, the 519 or somewhere?
It was up at a church at Yonge and Eglinton.
Oh.
And it was just like, there's not a single woman in the room.
They have men's meetings also, right? They have an all-men's meeting. I thought
this was the full, and I asked, I go, is this a men's meeting or is this a gay meeting? They went, oh no, this is the Pride meeting. I'm like, okay, I'm in the wrong meeting.
I mean, not at the end of the day, does it really matter? Like, I didn't
know.
I thought that it mattered. Like, I went to gay rehab. I will say, at some level, I probably wouldn't have rather not gone. There was still a lot of sort of fraternizing that I was trying to get away from. You know, some people were there to meet someone, which takes me back to the fact that I met my husband maybe a month out of rehab, right? And I didn't say no.
Which you shouldn't have done, right?
Well, I don't believe in any of the rules, and it goes back to the 12 steps of the rules and the going through. But I met a guy. I told him, here's my story. I am broke. I just got out of rehab. I want a child. Do you want to date me? He's like, okay. And I'm like, okay.
I love it. It's like, you're not going to find that on any website anymore. No one's swiping right for that.
No. And I just was honest. I said, I just wanted him to know that my goal now was not to meet a guy. I did not go into rehab meeting a guy, wanting to meet like the love. I knew that the meeting a guy was not going to bring me the joy or the fulfillment that I was looking for. So I knew that. I don't know what it was, but I was going forward to look for, and he wasn't even sure he wanted to be a parent, but he was along for the ride. And
the ride turned out well, which I want to talk about now.
It did. It turned out great.
So you dated for how long?
I think I asked him to marry me like a year after we met. And then we dated, I think it took 2 more years because he wasn't even out to his family. And I refused to get married until he told his family. And it took him a while.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're now in recovery. Things are moving along. You got married eventually first.
Yeah. Took 3 years. 3 years.
3 years. And it grows from there because your story, as awesome and crazy as the story is, from going to New York, from your grade 12 graduation up to finishing up at rehab, meeting your partner, and then life goes, like I said before, when we were talking beforehand, crazy things happen to people in recovery. So I've never met somebody who hasn't had something outlandish happen, and you've had it big time.
I mean, I think this is like normal life compared to what I thought was outlandish beforehand. I do believe now, and I don't think I believed this before, that I do believe in the phrase, everything will work itself out.
Yes.
I do believe in that now. Every time something happens, listen, I have very high anxiety and a lot of other things, but I do sometimes see things and go, I know it'll work itself out. Like some of the really bigger things in life, and I'm not talking about just health things, because I'm talking more about, I don't know. Every time I've noticed over years, every time we have some money issues, something comes along. I can't explain it. But things just things have been more positive, and maybe that's just the energy that we put out. I don't know what it is. I'm not someone who believes in fate per se, but yeah, a lot. Listen, I mean, a lot happened afterwards. I mean, sorry, I get choked up when I talk about this because I'm sometimes can't believe that I'm here and like what has happened. But me and my husband, because I had broken so many, I had lost my job so many times. I had a master's in real estate finance. I worked in finance, making lots of money, but eventually you don't show up for work 100 days in a row, you get fired. And I got it back. Anyway, after we met, I went back to school and became a teacher. So it completely changed my job. So that was the first amazing start that all happened. Right. He went back to school and became a teacher as well. He moved to Toronto. And then we decided to have a child. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in between, but he didn't want a child. When he finally got his job, he agreed. We were very lucky to find a lovely surrogate. And then, yes, like a photo, someone asked us to be in the room when we were giving birth because our surrogate didn't want any doctors. So it was just us in the room. She said she did birth photos before. Can she do some of an LGBTQ family? And I said, sure. Sure, it's free. Why not? That would be lovely. We don't have to take photos. We'll have a photographer there. So she took a photo and she told us it wouldn't be ready for weeks because, you know, the process of photography touching up. Then that night she sent us a photo and was like, oh, I really love this one. Do you mind if I post it on my Facebook? We were pretty busy with a newborn. And I didn't even look at the photo. I mean, I looked at it. It was like, pretty photo. Sure. Within a day, the photo had like sort of 40,000 likes. And then it just kept growing. It grew to like 2 million likes. Yeah. And like the next day, the newspaper started to call from all over the world. And when I would start to cry a second ago is what I've said to my husband a few times. I said, you know, if I was to be famous for anything, even one of my 15 minutes of fame, I couldn't be prouder that after this, you know, wanting to get out of rehab to be a parent, like just everything aligned. And you know, the son became known as the Pride baby. He was born on World Pride in 2014 here in Toronto. And now we get to talk about being parents all the time. We get to be on, you know, we just have a lovely life since then, and we have a voice. And I just couldn't be prouder of it. Like, it blows me away.
I remember that picture. I remember when it came out. That was huge. That was so big.
Toronto Life's top 10 things of the year, which was really exciting for us.
That's amazing. So then from there, you've got this amazing story, amazing picture went out. It's a great picture, and it's while we're talking, it's already been shown, so everybody will see what that is. What happened after that? Because we have the full-on positive side, and then that kind of flipped.
I don't know. It did flip
briefly.
I think. Well, what I was going to say is lots of weird stuff happened. First of all, our surrogate hadn't told anyone in her community that she was carrying. She's from a small town here in Ontario, and she hadn't shared with a lot of people that she was caring for an LGBTQ family. She lost a lot of friends and got a lot of hate mail. We, of course, got tons of hate. But we learned something about ourselves through all of this, is that we learned that we're not people that focus on hate. I don't know. That just came natural to us. I think we started reading some of the hateful stuff, and I was like, why am I bothering? And there was so much positive. So we focused on the positive throughout that. We've learned a lot about online hate throughout this process, but and we started to write a book about it because we constantly wanted to sort of take back the narrative and always bring it back to positive.
I love that.
And then I think in 2016, when Milo was a year and a half old, our photo was stolen off the internet by actually the current Italian government. They just won, the fascist party, fascism taking over the world, but we won't get into that. The Fratelli Italia, who was a very small party at the time, she took our photo, and I can share this with you too, and used it, the same photo that was all about love. She slapped a sign across it that said, "This baby will never know its mother. Fight for the rights of this child." There was a referendum in Italy, but the poster was everywhere. Large size posters. Yeah. So I have to tell you, I have no idea. Italy is a pretty corrupt country, and I'll say this because we've been suing them since 2016. What are we, 2022? The case has been heard 5 times. We're still waiting. The last time the case was heard was in April. Apparently, judges have a long time to make decisions. I make a joke because we don't even know if our lawyers there are stealing money that I have no idea. We sued because someone came forward and helped us. We actually got a lot of offers from lawyers. This is a prominent gay rights lawyer in Italy that took on the case. And we're hoping to win some money. I have no idea what happens. I know that you can win money, whatever. We're just hoping that we can have a voice in Italy. Sadly, the woman that we're suing has now become Prime Minister of Italy. But that was also another exciting time. We had such a following through like social media that we had people that were like, we had one woman, there was another woman in Ireland who also boycotted our photo borrowed the photo and used it as part of her campaign. Well, her Twitter blew up so bad that her Twitter was taken down. She took off the photo. The Italians did not do that. Anyways, and that's actually how we had been writing the book for a while, but we put it out right then because we were like, we called the book A Story About Love, and we took back the photo and we showed about how it was created through a real love story.
I love it. This is amazing. It's fascinating. I love the story, which is also why it wasn't just about your addiction that I want to talk about, because there's so much that happened after that. It's so incredible that I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason, and none of this would have happened if this didn't happen. Well,
that's true. I live in a lot of regret sometimes as a drug addict. The jobs I lost, the friends I lost, the money I lost, the living in New York, having to move back with my parents I lost. There's huge regrets, but you are absolutely right. I also look and go, it's one of those, I guess, sayings from AA. There are a few good ones, but about living in the past, right? Like, what am I doing? I can't change that.
Yeah.
I try and be as present as possible and look at my life. I'm very happy with my life and what we have created together.
It's amazing. And when you said there, we can't look back at the past, and I had a therapist look at me and they say, you realize your memory is just an electrical impulse.
Right.
That's all it is at this point in time. So when I get that like anxiety feeling, that sinking feeling, I just saw a picture the other day of an action figure that was a guy in a bed, and it said, the caption of it was, me at 4 a.m. thinking of something I said 17 years ago.
Yes, I've seen those.
And I get that, and I'll be like, it's just a memory. I can't regret that, because I can regret a lot, right? But from how far it's come, again, that's why I'm like, where you were to where you're here, you wouldn't even have that story to look to your partner and say, hey, just out of rehab, I got no money, and I want a kid. You in? Like that wouldn't even happen, which is a great line right there. So from there, what have you been? So you've got the one book.
I've obviously found the right guy, because who else? Yeah. Just the fact that he was like, okay, His family hated me. They all knew because I was very honest about my past. Obviously, what kind of parent wants their son? Oh, you're dating a out of luck on welfare drug addict? You know, it was hard. And I'll say that, and we were talking before about, you know, how you even knew that I was an addict from a post I made recently. And that I don't talk about it that much, but one of the weird things about becoming a teacher was I wasn't sure anymore because I was very vocal for many years about it. And it was really my identity for a while. And maybe most people's when they get out of rehab because they need to find a new identity. So you're identified as this person who was helping other people. Yeah. Lots of bad things came along the way. I tried to become a big brother. This is how I thought that would be a stepping stone to becoming a parent. And I was honest about my background. And they were like, no. Which is ironic because the same organization that turned me down called me last year to help them find big brothers within the community. Anyways, at first I was like really shocked, like I was taken aback, but now I'm a community leader. Like, how far can you come? And I had told them how, it wasn't the same person, how they had rejected me. And I found it very ironic that now I'm someone they're coming to help them recruit.
Right. And that's part of the story again, right? Like, again, this is what these moments where I said, you know, we don't realize crazy things and just happen. It doesn't have to be crazy where we won the lottery, but it's crazy. Like, you were rejected and now you're a community leader for them, helping them. That's not what people associate with the guy on welfare, you know, post-rehab, pre-rehab, like none of that's there. It's when people see you. And that's why I wanted, you know, doing this podcast. It's not about bringing up the past and the regret. It's saying, hey, this was here. And now since then, all of this has happened. How crazy, how amazing. And the hope is to inspire other people. And the inspiration needs to be not just for people who are in recovery or post-recovery or pre-recovery, but anybody, right? Anybody who can hear the story. Because I look at rock bottom. You had your rock bottom. I had my rock bottom. Rock bottom isn't necessarily just for people who go through addiction.
It's true.
Right? So it's looking at, you know, how we can tell our stories to help people, which is, again, I love the story and all these crazy things that have come back and how you've grown. And I would say, look at you and you inspire me because it's such a huge change from where you were. But think about all the things in the last 15 years. Those previous 15 years are a little blip. It's a blip. They're so like, because you were this for 15 years. And now you've got this chapter, this, like a new book. Every single new story is a new book for you. You had the same book for 15 years.
And that's how we know that we've changed. Is like when I was saying about how we were fighting to make our parents or our friends build back our trust. Can you imagine if I was late now? They would be worried. You know, right. If I missed like an event, everyone would be like, "Where's Frank?" Before it was just like, "That's Frank," right? Like no one would think anything of it. So yes, I never thought it would change, and then one day it did. Like I don't know what that day was, but I remember fighting with my family. Like this isn't who I am anymore. But when are you going to believe me? And then it just happens. So like, and then this is who I became.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And yes, talking to friends, it's like, you what? You were an addict? I mean, I have no problem telling them, and I want them to know most of the time because I think it's really important that they understand where I came from and how different my life is. Just sometimes it just comes up out of the blue.
Yeah.
When we talk, I don't know what we're talking about, but someone else's addiction. The sad part is when I posted that the other day, I got a lot of, I got your call asking to be on this pod, but I got 3 other calls from people that I know that were struggling.
Yes.
And I just felt bad because I couldn't help them. I don't know. I spoke to both. I spoke to 2 of them at length for a long time. One of them was an alcoholic who is living a very hidden alcoholic. and the other one also severe depression and other things. And they wanted to know what my secret was. I get a lot of calls from people, their best friends and addict. What's your secret? I'm like, there's no secret. I don't have a secret. My secret was my own internal want to get better.
Right.
And I can't help you make that for anyone else.
It's a hard one. I get the same. Whenever I post stuff, I wrote a Huffington Post article years ago, and that's my annual. I post that. And whenever I do, I'll get 5, 6 messages from people who, again, I would never have thought had a problem.
The people that messaged me would not want anyone to know, but yeah. Yeah.
And so it reminds me, like, that's why I do it. That's why I talk about it. That's why I put the stories out there, because it's lonely. It's freaking lonely especially if you're hiding it. It's really lonely, so the people that reach out, and it's hard because they're looking for the secret. I had a friend of mine who works at a rehab center, and somebody said to me, "You've been sober, clean sober so many years. What's your secret?" Because you want to know the secret. Do you want to know the actual secret to not doing drugs? Because yes, don't do drugs. That's the secret. It's about finding the tools to make sure we don't do it, right? Like somebody said to me once, "Do you think you'll ever be able to drink again?" And I said, "I can drink right now. It just won't end well." Right? That's my thing. Like, no one's stopping me from having the drink.
Right.
I just know, I've seen that movie so many times. I know how it ends. Don't need to see that movie again, especially now because I've got more involved that I actually know how this would end, but it wouldn't even end the way I think it would end. It would end much worse.
Well, I went off crystal meth for a while, and then I did it once. It brought me way back down. Like, I was off for 5 years, and someone gave it to me. That night, I was, like, out searching. So I agree. But it also taught me, and I'm sure you would agree, that my brain, and that we have much more power than we give ourselves credit for. Because people tell me all the time that crystal meth is, like, really hard to get off of. It is not something that many people are successful. And it's not a toot the horn, but what it taught me is that I kept smoking cigarettes for years. Right. And then one day I just quit. And people are like, "You can't," like, I said, "No," because I knew that I could do it. Like, it wasn't easy. And I had to go through the same process. My brain tells me all the time I'm having cravings. You just have to turn them off. You gotta change the direction. You gotta do something, but you can do it. Everyone can do it.
100%. And it just takes time.
It takes time.
I think we've seen too many shows where they do a 28-day program and all of a sudden life is amazing. For some that is, but for majority.
I wish that the narrative was more like when I said about Liz Taylor, and I'm not kidding, that's what I believed, was that there was I think we know a little bit more now, but I mean that it's an ongoing battle. It's not like a little hospital that you go into and you're all better. It's just the beginning.
It's just me. And I know that when I've had days that aren't going well and they still happen, right? I'm into the candy.
Is that what
it's that sugar, right? It's that, and that's the one thing that I give to people, who, when they stop, there's somebody that called me actually about a year ago. I said, I've got a family member who's going through rehab and they're keep on struggling. I'm like, here's the deal. You need to get them much candy because part of, especially with alcohol, on top of the alcohol addiction, you're getting rid of a massive sugar addiction at the same time. So I'm like, give them candy, right? Like this kind of like when they have that moment. So my wife and I used to have a gym, and whenever there was a nut and candy store next door. And so if I walked in and buy like $10 worth of nuts, they're like, "Good day." I'm like, "Amazing day." Walk in with $40 of like Mike and Ike's walking out the front door. They're like, "Not good, not good." Like they knew my moods based on that. So we still, the thing that people don't realize, that even though we're out of the addiction and in recovery, we still struggle with day to day. And we have taught ourselves that we know one easy way to get rid of it. And that, I think, is for a lot of people realizing that, it might be 15 years, 16, 20 years, but it's always there.
Absolutely. It's why I didn't give up cigarettes while I was in rehab. A lot of people do it all at once, but
That's a lot to give up.
It was a lot to give up.
A lot to give up.
I needed to smoke. And because, anyway, and then I gave up cigarettes when I had my son because I became a teacher, and I was like, I'm standing on the sidewalk with students smoking.
Right.
That is not really what I picked. Like, so I had pictures of what I wanted my life to look like.
Yeah.
And that wasn't it. Like, I didn't want to be the guy I wanted to be a role model, and I didn't want to be the guy smoking cigarettes with the students in high school. So not that it wasn't allowed. It was actually, it's allowed if you go to the smoking area. But I made a lot of changes because I want to be role models. And I feel like a lot of this has allowed me to be a role model, and maybe helped me. Maybe a lot of this stuff has also helped me to stay sober, just because
sure.
I have people looking up to me, and I don't want to disappoint others,
including yourself,
including myself. Right.
It's not just about it; it's about you.
I know. I was like, but every day is different. Sometimes you do it for others. Sometimes you do it for yourself. Sure. Right. Whatever gets you through that day.
Exactly. So I just want to wrap this up. I want to be respectful of your time. Where are you now? What are you doing now? What are the big things that you've taken out of, the last couple of years from the surrogacy, which that grew all about love? Like, if people were looking for what's Frankie doing now other than being a teacher? Where can they see you?
They should follow my husband on Instagram at Families About Love. Family is About Love. I'll send you that stuff.
Everything will be linked into the podcast. So,
I mean, one of the most exciting things that's happened is I was approached from a non-for-profit in the U.S. called Men Having Babies, and they go around the world, travel around the world, and help men have babies through surrogacy. And so they brought me in as a board member. I don't know, when they asked me, I'm like, "What is a board member?" I'm like, anyways, it was very hard because this has been one of the biggest challenges for me is what I do is now I travel around the world and I go and speak to people at conferences and others. It has been hard, right? Like, I could speak one-on-one in therapy, but to go and speak in front of a group of my peers, I know I do it at school in front of students, but I don't know why, but it's very different. And a bunch of gay men also. So I've always felt that extra layer of judgment. Anyways, I took it on because I wanted to push myself further and do things that made me uncomfortable. So I've been doing that, and it still makes me uncomfortable 4 years later.
I love it. Uncomfortable is good.
No, I wish that it didn't. Like I said to my husband, I'm going to another conference next month, and I'm like, God, I'm still stressed about it. Like, it gets me, but I guess pushing us out of the comfort zone is good. I'm just a dad. Other than that, we love to travel. We are trying to look to the future now, what we want to do. Hopefully, we have some goals. We want to live on a beach. We have some things, and we thought that we could never do. And I think COVID and addiction and lots of things have taught me in life to maybe just go do what you want to do. Life is short.
Absolutely.
So we are in the process of figuring out ways that we can live the life we dream of.
I love it. That's amazing. Listen, Frankie, I want to thank you for doing this today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All the links that we've talked about, everything will be linked. You'll send them to me later on. They'll all be in the podcast notes so people can find you that way. Now, before you go,
yes,
what's the one big takeaway that you would say, the one takeaway you can give to other people? Not the secret. I know there's no secret sauce to this, but what would you give to somebody who's saying, I don't know if I can do this, whether it's recovery or take that next step in life, that big, I got to change. So what do I do? What's your big takeaway to give somebody?
I think we've spoken about a lot of them, right? I say to people, for me, it was about finding something that I could focus on, a small goal. Maybe having a child wasn't a small goal, but I was even starting with being a big brother. But something that I just had thought couldn't happen, and I just made a decision that I was going to try and make it happen. That was my biggest takeaway. Like, I just sat there that one night. It was like, how am I going to ever do what my dream is if I'm an addict? I just couldn't do it. So I found a goal, and I just focused on it, and I didn't let anything else in.
I love it. I love it. So, Frankie, don't go anywhere. I'm just going to wrap this up. Again, Frankie Nelson, thank you so much for being here. So good to catch up with you again as well. It's been a long time. Kind of come into those lives here and there. I really appreciate it. Again, if anybody has any questions, they know where to find you. They'll be in the links. And again, thanks so much. And thank you for having the courage to really see the issues you had and get the help you needed. And there's always help out there, right? And that's, we've got recovery, we got addiction, we've got resilience, which we got to be, and the renewal. So I really appreciate it. You have definitely risen up to the challenge and everything else. And I want to thank you, Frankie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Taube.